I get asked a lot of questions on my YouTube channel and also through my Instagram DMs. And so today I've collated the top 10 questions that I'm most frequently asked and that I was recently asked via my Instagram stories. So if you don't follow me on Instagram, that is my handle and there is your cue. So let's get into the first question that I am most frequently asked, and it is, why did I choose Salerno to first move to? Now, I've already filmed a video about why I like the southern part of Italy more so than any other part of Italy, so I'll link that video up here. But in terms of why I chose Salerno, it was a connection and I instantly felt at home. It's like when you know, it's this. I've always wanted to live somewhere that felt authentic. I was never attracted to the beautiful tourist destinations and the places that don't really represent real life in Italy. I like authenticity. I like to live somewhere which feels real. And so Salerno ticked all of those boxes for me because it's a small city, but it has everything that you need. It's super well connected. It's got the sea, which was a huge plus point for me because I had always wanted to live by the sea at that point. And it was just a really, really beautiful place for me to begin my journey here in Italy. And it's a city that I always recommend to people who want to move to Italy for the first time because I just think it's such a lovely way to begin your journey and to integrate into Italian life. I think as well for me, I felt a connection to southern Italy for lots of different reasons, for the way of life here, for the people that I had met, for just this kind of culture here in South Italy. And I could be wrong when I say this, but I don't think I am based on the hundreds of comments that I've received from you now on this channel. But life in northern Italy can feel a bit colder in terms of the temperament of the people and in terms of the lifestyle itself. And I'd already come from a culture like that in London, so I really was attracted to the warmth and the kind of openness of the people here in South Italy. So that's the reason why I chose Salerno, just because it was a feeling, nothing more. And I always say you should listen to your feelings, however kind of woo-woo concept you might imagine that to be. It's true. Listen to your feelings. Your gut knows where is the right place for you, but also from a practical point of view, it's important to choose somewhere that means that you can really set your life up here. And for me, at the very beginning, living in a remote location just would not have been the best solution. I needed to live somewhere where I could move around independently. So Salerno was just the perfect place for me to begin my journey as a city, because you should also know Salerno is a province too. Okay, question number 2. How does one get by on such low salaries in Italy? The average is only 1,500 euros per month. Well, actually in the south of Italy, it's more like 1,200 euros per month. Now, I will start by saying that everything is relative. Now, if you're living somewhere like America, in the UK, somewhere like that, when you look at a salary like this per month, it's like ridiculous. So you're like, how can somebody survive? But then you've got to start looking at the bigger picture because the cost of things here is relative to what people earn. However, I will say this is becoming a little less so now that everything is increasing in price. But let's take a couple of examples just to show you what I mean. So if we're taking housing, for example, the apartment that we rented in Palermo, we had a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment, a separate kitchen, a separate dining room, a separate living room, and we had 2 balconies and a veranda, and that cost 600 euros per month for the rent alone. It was in a residence, so we did have to pay condominium fees on top, but just for the base rent alone, that was 600 euros per month. Let me tell you, there's absolutely no way you could ever find an apartment like that in London for a similar price. So this is what I mean. I mean, also it depends on where you are in Italy. In northern parts of Italy, that kind of money will get you a room if you're lucky. So everything is relative, yes, and everything is dependent on where you are in Italy as to how you are really going to survive in this country. But if we're looking at other aspects, for example, a pack of cigarettes, I don't smoke, but I know plenty of people here who do. And a pack of cigarettes here, you can pay, depending on the brand, like €5.50 you can pay for a pack of cigarettes here in Italy. Super cheap compared to the UK. Like the price of cigarettes in the UK is like double that, triple that even. So it's this. In that case, if you look at what people earn compared to what they pay for like their everyday essentials, you can see that, you know, it kind of works. But you have to remember that people adapt their lives accordingly. Like people here, especially in the south of Italy, in my mind, they live quite simple but meaningful lives. And that's not in a really romanticized sense because, we always say slow living in Italy, it's that dreamy La Dolce Vita. No, I'm not meaning it like that. I mean that people here are not extravagant. People here, buy the essentials. They focus their money on what is important to them, which is usually connected to their family, their home and food. And so, you see these people live a life that perhaps is very different to the lives of people in other countries where it's more about show, having the latest, designer clothes or having, the latest car or whatever it may be. Like people here in South Italy, some people drive around in absolute wrecks, but for them, that's not important. What's important is that their money is spent on other things, such as having good food to eat every single day. So I think people's priorities are different here. That's something else that ties into the amount of money that they earn. People place different priorities on different aspects of life here, and as such, that is where their money tends to go. So just consider this. Everything is relative. I think on that kind of salary in the north of Italy, you will struggle a little bit more because things are ridiculously expensive there. However, in the southern parts of Italy, you can get by. I'm not saying that you're going to live the wildest, most extravagant life, but you can certainly go out for drinks a couple of times a week, maybe go and eat out, at a local trattoria or some kind of restaurant or a couple of times a month. You can get by on that kind of money. It all depends on how much you pay for your other bills as well, though. Everything is relative. Okay, question number 3. Why is Salerno so expensive? Now, this is a good question because prior to leaving Salerno city, I should specify, I had already said that it was one of the more expensive places in South Italy to live and just in general. However, having now returned back to the province of Salerno, I can tell you that Salerno has tripled in price in terms of how much housing now is and in terms of everything. And I think there's a few different reasons for this. Firstly, there's a lot of investment that's been made into that city at the moment in terms of public services, in terms of tourist attractions, in terms also of like rebuilding a stadium. They want to rebuild the stadium in Salerno as well, the airport that was opened just last year. So, there are a few things that are being done with Salerno kind of in the center of that attention at the moment. And as such, I think people are recognizing that it's the place to invest money into, and it's the place to maybe buy property, rent it out, do holiday lets, things like this. It is also becoming a bit more well known now for tourists. It's definitely not at the same level as like any of the Amalfi coastal towns, but people are starting to discover Salerno more, particularly because we have the cruise ships that dock there now as well. And people are starting to realize that it's perhaps a slightly more affordable place to stay if they want to explore the Amalfi Coast and that part of Italy. So I think there are a few different reasons why Salerno is becoming more expensive, but of course, it's not as expensive as if you were in the northern parts of Italy. And I will also say that if you were to be a little bit outside of the city itself, but still within the province, you can find more reasonably priced properties. It just depends like where you want to be. Like the cost of life doesn't have to be that expensive in the Salerno province. It really depends on where you are. If you are in the center, things will be a little bit more expensive naturally, but yeah, it's this really. It has become a bit more expensive as a city, absolutely. Like when we decided to move back here to the Salerno province, we were shocked at how much like the cost of apartments to rent were, for example. It was ridiculous. So for this, these aspects have changed, but I think it's inevitable as the city grows, as the city becomes more well known, that the price of things are just going to go up as a result. Question number 4, how easy is it to move from Italy to the UK? What are your top 5 tips? This is a really good question. I have to be honest with you. As you all know, I moved here pre-Brexit, so my experience was very different. I will say it's a little bit more complicated now because your ability to live here on a long-term basis will be visa dependent. However, I'm not going to say to you that it's impossible, but I am going to say to you that you're going to need to take your time and you're going to need to research your options. Everything really depends on, number 1, first tip, why you will be moving here and what you will be doing here. So if you're retiring here, this is something else that you need to consider. But if you want to work here, then you've got to realize that your ability to work in this country will depend very much on a working visa. So you've got to look at your options. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I am saying that it's a little bit more complicated now that the UK is outside of Europe in terms of the EU. So this is something that you need to do. So my first tip to you would be to really get clear on what your reason for moving to Italy is and what you're going to be doing with yourself here. Secondly, I would look on the gov.uk website. There is actually a section about moving to and living in Italy on that website, and that can point you in the direction of some further resources that can help you. Thirdly, I would also research on the internet any resources that can assist with visas or talking you through the process of obtaining a visa and kind of, what the steps you need to take. Fourthly, I would even consider splitting your time if you can. If this is something that you can afford to do and it's feasible for you, doing the whole 90-day here, 90-day off thing is something that can alleviate the need for all of the visas and for all of the other stresses that come with that. So is that something that you could practically do? Can you live here on that kind of on-off basis? Can you buy a property here? Can you kind of just, live in it just a couple of times in the course of a year? What can you afford to do with your means and your lifestyle? But that could be a potential plan B if your ability to live here long term is a little bit too complicated. I would also seek advice from other people who have done something similar. Now, I'm always very kind of disclaimer with this, because people can sometimes have very negative experiences when it comes to the bureaucracy in this country. So if you're going to seek the advice of others, always take it with a pinch of salt. Take the emotion out of what they're saying and listen to the facts of the situation. That's really, really important, because I think you can learn from other people's experiences, but you don't want to be dissuaded by them. So these are the tips that I would give to you if you want to move to Italy from the UK in this moment of time. So the next question, number 5, how's the hospital system? I'm hearing quite good. Well, I'm going to say to you, I think it really depends on what part of Italy you live in. Yes, the healthcare system is renowned around the world for having some of the best doctors and nurses in this country, absolutely. However, the quality of the hospitals themselves, it really depends on the part of Italy you're in. There are long waiting times, particularly if you need to go to a specialist department or to have an operation. So, I guess very similar to the NHS in the UK at the moment. I had to have an appointment in Palermo last summer for a checkup on my legs, and I had to wait 3 months for that appointment. So what people tend to do here is, if it is more of an emergency or they don't want to wait that long, they will pay to go privately. And really, the cost of private healthcare here can sometimes be cheaper than in your own country. So, it really depends on what you have to do and on kind of what it is that you need looking at. But it's this, I think, I've been in hospitals in Sicily, for example, and they've had no air conditioning. They've not been in the best of conditions. Hit and miss, the hospitals here. It really, really does depend on where you are. I can't speak for the northern parts of Italy. If you live in the northern parts of Italy and you can help, please comment below and tell us what the hospitals are like there. But certainly in southern Italy, it really, really does depend on where you are. And I would say to you that the service you receive is good. The doctors and nurses here are exceptional at what they do. But the problem lies with the conditions in which they work and sometimes the lack of investment that goes into those places. So that's the real issue, I would say. Okay, question number 6. What are your tips for learning Italian? Great question. Number 1, stop making excuses. You've got to learn the language. You've got to find the time to do it. I don't want to hear I don't have time to study Italian. You don't have a choice. You have to study the language. So I would say focus on consistency. People have a very backwards attitude when it comes to learning a language, in that they think they have to spend hours focusing on it. I don't believe that's true. I think that you have to focus more on short, consistent actions, because they stack up and eventually lead you to a far greater outcome than if you're trying to find these huge chunks of time in the course of a week. This is a principle I gleaned from Atomic Habits. This great book right here, highly recommend it if you've not read it yet, but it changes the way that you approach any kind of new habit that you want to learn, such as, taking up a new language. I would also say that you want to mix up your resources. So don't just rely on one particular study book or one particular podcast or one particular course if you've chosen to go down that route. Mix up your resources a little bit. You want to be listening to Italian as much as you can, especially if you're not already living in this country. So you might want to consider listening to some videos on YouTube in Italian or some podcasts in Italian. You also want to be trying to expose yourself to the vocabulary and the words as much as possible. So you might want to try and read some simple texts in Italian to see if that can help you. You will need study books, absolutely, just to give you a sense of structure. But you just want to kind of mix up your resources a little bit. Maybe you want to include some games and kind of gamify the experience of language learning, make it more interesting. People often say to me, what do I think of Duolingo? Duolingo, I think, will give you something, but it's not going to give you everything. In fact, I watched a really interesting video the other week where somebody completed a course on Duolingo and they got just like a beginner's level from it. So it's definitely not something that's going to help you become advanced at the language. But in order for you to learn a few words here and there and grasp, some sentences, then it can be a tool that you use in addition to others. I don't think it should be what you solely use to learn Italian. But this is what I would recommend to you. If you are already living in Italy, then watch more kind of Italian television shows, watch films and have the subtitles on if you need to help you. Try to immerse yourself as much as you can with the language. Really pay attention to when people are speaking to you. I know it's easy to zone out when you don't understand what someone is saying, but it's really, really important to try and concentrate on the words because this is going to improve your listening skills. So these are some tips that I would give to you if you want to learn Italian. Okay, question number 7. What tips do you have for teaching English in Italy? Well, a few. Number 1, do you really want to become an English teacher? This should be the first question that you ask yourself, because just because you speak the language doesn't mean that you're cut out to be a teacher. There are many other skills that go into teaching that people often overlook, such as patience, compassion, empathy, organisation, passion. Teaching is not something you can do half-heartedly, because trust me, you give off a vibe and it's bloody obvious to everybody that you don't enjoy what you do. You must have a sense of passion when it comes to teaching, and you must be kind of motivated to want to help your students to get better and to improve. And trust me, the students pick up on that and they appreciate that a lot. So do you really want to be an English teacher first and foremost? I would also say to you that you have to really research your options when it comes to teaching here in Italy. You have private schools, you have state schools, but something you need to be aware of is that your pay can vary depending on where you work, and so can your contracts and conditions of work as well. So you've really got to pay attention to this. You've got to understand your options when it comes to teaching here. Some schools will want you to open a partita IVA to teach, which means that you're teaching more on a freelance basis. That doesn't work for everyone. Some schools will give you, at the very beginning, a determinato contract, which means it covers the first school year. And after that, you may continue or you may not. And other schools will give you an indeterminato contract, which doesn't have an expiry date. So it really, really depends. I will say to you as well that you have to be sure that you can teach the language. This sounds really obvious, but sometimes we use the language every single day, but if we have to explain a particular grammar concept to someone, we may not be able to do that. We just know it exists. There's a quote from Albert Einstein that says something along the lines of, I cannot remember it verbatim, but it's something like, if you are not able to explain something simply, you don't know it well enough. It's something like this. And I think it's true. If you are able to explain the nuances of the English language to another person in a really simple way, then you have a good grasp of the language. However, if you struggle to explain why a tense is a particular structure or why we use a particular word, I think you're going to find things a lot more difficult to teach here. Question number 8, would you recommend moving to Sicily? In short, my answer is it really depends. It depends on what you want to gain from your life in Sicily, and it depends really on your age as well. If you're young and you're moving to Sicily to start a career, to build a life in that sense, I'm going to say no, I wouldn't recommend that, because the employment opportunities are sadly not present on that island. Hence the fact, for example, that we are back here in the Salerno province for this reason. If you're older though and you want to find somewhere to retire to, I would recommend Sicily because it's a beautiful island and you've got so many different towns, villages and cities across the island that you can choose between. And honestly, it's one of the most beautiful places that I think I've ever been to. Now, if we're taking Palermo, for example, the city that I lived in for 2.5 years, I can tell you that's a little bit more crazy. Like, I tell it to you how it is, but that's the capital city and the main city of Sicily. So, you've got to consider that there are other places around the island that are a little bit more organized and less chaotic, for example. So I would recommend Sicily to retire to, but definitely not as a place to go and start a career and build a life necessarily, because I think that you'll struggle. Sicily is a place that people love to go on holiday to, often have holiday homes there. But it's a place that people look down on as well. People criticize it for the dirtiness, for the disorganization, for the mindset of the people. Yet there is a lack of investment made into that particular island. And I really truly understand why Sicilians say that they're not part of Italy, because it does feel like there is this separation. When I lived there for 2.5 years, I definitely felt that separation, absolutely, from mainland Italy. And it wasn't just the fact that I was on an island, it was like a feeling as well. And I would also say that, it does feel like when you live in Sicily, that you are stuck in a time warp. And what I mean by that is that people there are very stuck in the history of their island and in what was. Like, I remember when I would walk around Palermo and I would see beautiful villas and incredible architecture, some of which have been left to ruin because, maybe it was owned by the mafia at one point and now doesn't have any kind of ownership status. Or maybe it was something that, could no longer be kept in good condition and as such was left to ruin. But there were so many reminders of the wealth that was once present on that island. And sometimes it really feels like people cling on to that story. And so I do feel that in a way, Sicily feels a lot more backward compared to perhaps other parts of Italy for this reason, because they're trapped in this cycle and struggle and the problems with the mafia that they've had to deal with for all of these years. And so you have to respect that and you have to understand that that's kind of the way life can be there sometimes. And there is that stark comparison between, the poorer parts of Sicily and where you can find money, because there is money on that island. It's just not in the most obvious of places. So I think it's this. I think it really depends on your personal circumstances as to whether or not you should move to Sicily. It's a beautiful place. I love it. And, I will always have this connection to Palermo, absolutely, but it's not a place for everyone. And so I think you have to spend a decent amount of time there to really understand if it's the right place for you to live in on a long-term basis. Question number 9, what's the biggest mistake you made with your move to Italy? Definitely, hands down, not learning the language before I came here. I was super naive when I moved here, and it was all a bit of a rush as well. Like, it was in a matter of months between deciding I wanted to move here and actually stepping off the plane. But I didn't spend enough time learning the language at all. And I really took it for granted that I would be able to get by speaking in English. And as I've spoken about a lot on my channel, that is the wrong attitude to have, because English is not widely spoken here. And if it is, it's not usually to a very high standard. So you have to put the effort in and learn the language if you truly want to integrate into life here. Those struggles I had when I first moved here in the first year to a year and a half, a lot of them stem back to the fact that I wasn't able to express myself. I was an absolute mute in social situations, and I watched my personality and character slowly ebb away, and it just all got on top of me towards the end. So I really think that you need to make sure this is a priority for you. It should be the one thing that you are focusing on every single day besides everything else associated with your move. Because if you cannot speak here, I promise you, you're going to find it one of the most challenging experiences of your life. And whilst I can look back on that time now and I can take the lessons from it and realize how much I've grown as a result, my life needn't have been that difficult had I just put the effort in and learnt the language from the beginning. Question number 10, do you regret moving to South Italy? Absolutely not. I honestly cannot see myself living in any other part of Italy. I just feel this connection here. I feel at home here. I feel passionate about this part of Italy. I hate the way people look down on this part of Italy. Like, why would you do that? Yes, things don't work here. Yes, there can be a strange mentality here sometimes. Yes, you know, okay, it can be really disorganized here. But hello, people come here on holiday. It can't be that bad, right? I don't know. I'm just really aligned to living here. And it's kind of what I said when I said about living in Salerno. When you know, you know. And everyone is so different. You know, some people will never move to the south of Italy for all of the reasons that I'm attracted to it. So, you know, we are all so different, but for me, I have absolutely zero regrets. And I'm so happy that I moved to Salerno first. I felt like that prepared me for Palermo. I could never have moved to Palermo first. I think if I'd moved to Palermo first, I probably wouldn't have survived and stuck it out as long as I have done here in South Italy, for sure, because I needed some kind of groundwork before moving there because it's such a wild city. But yeah, I love South Italy. I do love it. It's beautiful. I love the mentality here, like in terms of family, in terms of connection, in terms of being present, in terms of appreciating life, just all of it really. And I'm not a person for snobbery. I'm not a person for looking down on other parts of Italy and kind of like, oh, I'm so much better than you. No, like, you know, there is so much goodness here. And like I say, the ironic thing is that the Italians that look down on this part of Italy are the first to come here to spend their August and their summer. So, you know, I think that tells you all you need to know. So these are the answers to the 10 most frequently asked questions that I receive. I hope they've helped you in some way. And if you have any more questions, why not take the opportunity and comment below, and I will do another video like this in the future to answer them. I will see you in the next video.